Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's get started for today, inshallah. We'll continue on the reactive forms. And yesterday we had a little glitch, an issue, and I looked into it. Actually, the issue was we were not associating the form controls within the form group over here on the input control at all. So let's take care of that. And the way we associate it is by form control name. That should be the name of the control that we have added over here, and which would be form over here, which would be the name. Similarly, let me do the same thing for others. Control name, and now this is still an object displaying a object or string representation of an object. And I looked into it. Apparently, this is not working. Even if I give, or let's go back to what was working. So if I just give it a string, like for example B over here, it gets that initial value. Or if I give an object with just a value, with the value and disabled one more property, disabled false, make it true so that it's prominently seen. And that works. So empty object is not working. I thought it would just assume that the value is null. Oh, and surprisingly, for me at least, even this is not working. Value, just the value without the disabled property, it goes back to object. So in any case, let's just have it explicit over here and then kind of implicit, give it a null. Hopefully that works. And for fragile, there is nothing, there is no initial value. It's either checked or unchecked. We'll leave it as unchecked instead of checked explicitly. So disable, let's make it false. So anyway, just I came to know something new today or yesterday. So now let's discuss a different technique of how to dynamically generate something, how to dynamically generate a form or at least form controls. So let's say we have a requirement where we need to add tags to a product. So while adding or even editing, let's have an introduce a requirement that if there are any tags that the product manager wants to add along with adding a product, then how to go about it, how to give him the UI that would let him do that. So we need something like this. If and let's have a little header in there, maybe H3, H4, product tags or just tags. And then we need something like maybe a text box label for maybe we don't even need the label because it would be repetitive, saying tag, or it will be, I mean, the requirement is the tags might be many. One way we can achieve that is maybe give an input, and then probably you have seen this on some of the sites. Input type is text, and there will be little information over here asking the user to enter or separate the tags with a semicolon or some kind of separator, right? And that this would take care of it when we see when we process the submit action. There we can check and then split the input string. Let's say the input string is comes as a parameter tag string. We just take out the string tags and then tags dot split, and then we get an array of those semicolon separated tags, and then we process or we just send it over the wire to the backend. So this is one way of doing it, and the other way of doing it is give the user an ability to add a tag per one text field or one text box. So button add tag, and on click we'll bind it to an add tag action, add tag method. Type submit will submit the form. I believe submit is the default on type, so I just make it type button so that it doesn't submit the entire form and this method doesn't get triggered. So something like this. We have product tags and then we have an add tag button. Let me introduce a break over there, line break. So we have the UI, and then add tag should add one more text box over here and keep on adding until the user is done with the tags, and then finally submit. So let me put this entire diff just before the submit button. It's up to us, the design. I mean, if there are too many tags like 10, 15, the submit button would be way below those text fields. So it might not look nice or so nice in that scenario, but that's a choice we have to make. Either keep the submit button up top, and then if there are too many, then the user will have to scroll up or down depending on where we are putting this diff. So anyway, that's the design choice that we have to make. Let's go with this. So what do we need is add tag button, and the way to do it is from the concept that we have already seen. It's not so easy. So we'll introduce a new, or we'll go over a different concept new for us called form array, and how to build that array and initialize that array. So it's pretty similar to what we have done earlier. So with form builder service, we have grouped certain input controls or certain form controls. So it's the same way. What we have to do is give it a name. For example, tags again, or tags control. It's up to us. This dot form builder dot array. That array, as the name suggests, and also from the helper window we can gather, it accepts an array of a configuration of form controls. I can leave the array empty. That means we don't have any control to start with. So let me have an initial control 2 within this array. So this dot form builder. So last time we have seen we can do something like new form control, that we can still do over here. New form control and with initial value, right, and then pass in the validators next. Or we can use the form builder service itself to create another form, another control. So this would be control. And it accepts initial state, and then similarly the validator that we have seen. So it's just a little tiny bit different. Instead of instantiating a new form control, we are utilizing form builders control method, and again behind the scenes then a new control will get instantiated. So let's have the same validators required first. Let's quickly go over something else because it helps us in just a bit. So if I do a control dot on this particular property, it gives me some, supposed to give me some options, but okay. So this is a shortcut of writing a property. Behind the scenes, what it will look like is something like this. So let me introduce a new property for just for demonstration purposes, and then we can easily take it off instead of working on uh, one of the existing properties. So let's name the property as some string of type string. This can be written as private some string of type string, and a public property some string of type string, sometimes it's not a good idea to get used to the IDE's code generation mechanism. Now I am unable to gather how to write a full property. Public set. Okay. Okay. Somehow Visual Studio Code has that, so I'll just use it. Okay. So this is the way to write full property, and this line 16 is just a shortcut of all this. So we have a private variable that is set on if the user wants to pass in some value or initialize it to some value, and if the user wants to read what is the current value, and then we just pass in this private variable. So basically we hold the value in this variable and we expose a public property to either return something or set something. But what if we want the user to be only read that value and not write that value? We can just take it off. Right? And if the user if you want to expose some value that is already there, we don't need a backing field for that. So to write just a get property, we just need something like this along with this syntax, and we can return whatever we want. Maybe just this is static string. So right now we want to use this kind of getter or read only property. And if you want a write only property, all we need to take is, write with the set syntax. Your Studio Code provides a snippet for that. So set whatever value needs to be set. We need to give the name of that property, XYZ, and then that's it. And we need to store it someplace, right? If somebody is trying to set something, so wherever we want to store this dot, and we can have a private field for that purpose. So right now we just need a get, because we don't want the user, or we don't want to expose any UI to set the tags or the tags from array. So we just need a get. Let's name it as tags. And that is a form array. That's what we are returning, or we are trying to return. And how to read any control from the form group is we go after form group. The name of the form group, add product form dot get that particular, and we have named it as tags dot controls as form array. It's supposed to be okay. Currently it's not reading controls. The IntelliSense is not reading controls for some reason, but let's try this out first. So why did we have to do this? Just to make it easy on the template side, just read the property instead of writing all this code. I believe this should suffice, but this is just in my opinion, this is just for the sake of easiness, we can just refer to this tags property and do a ngFor over it to generate our controls. So let's write this over here. The UI for generating those dynamic controls. So I'll just enclose this input control in a diff. Actually, we don't need this input. We'll do ngFor over it. So because this as an array, it can have multiple values, more than one. Tag of tags. I believe we can have to pass the controls at least over here, but we'll see. So for each of it, we want to generate this diff, and in this diff, we'll have an input. And the form control name is, we we have to give it a reference to the, the controls or the tag, the control that we have named as tag over here, just like what we have done earlier. Over here, form control name was name. Because of this add form group, we are telling it to go and find a control in this group by the name, and over here by the name brand, over here by the name fragile. So over here we need to pass in similar reference. So that would be this tag itself, or we can even do something like this. We haven't looked at this concept, but Angular lets us define some variables over here like this. So index variable maintains the index of the current iteration over these controls, over this iterable. It can be an array, it can be some kind of collection. So index holds that particular index of the current control. So we are reading that index into I. We can pass in I over here. And also ngFor also maintains an odd and even variable, giving us the ability to know if the index is odd or even. So if the array has, let's say, 10 products, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 would be odd. So that oddity is maintained in the variable odd, and even similarly for even index variables, even index positions. So we have a button called add tag, and that the click action on it is bound to add tag method, which we haven't written yet. So let's go ahead and write that add tag. And what is add tag supposed to do? Just add one more control dynamically to this array. And also for easiness, instead of writing all this line, we can just go for this property tag, which will actually return the same thing. So we'll do tags dot push, and push what? One more control. And let me initialize that with the word new, and we'll have the same validators. So in Visual Studio Short Code and many other, okay, let me actually try that first, and then yeah. In Visual Studio, at least there used to be a shortcut where you can just uh, go for ending brace, ending bracket, or beginning bracket, and do control and then the same bracket. It would select the entire thing, but apparently it's just Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. So I'll have to manually do it line by line, word by letter by letter. Okay. So just copy paste the same validators over there. So this will be the add tag action. We are adding dynamically one more control. With others, it's not very straightforward, at least if it is even possible. With form array, it gives us ability to add dynamically more controls. So let's see if we got everything right. Yeah. But the initial value is still not working for some reason. We'll figure it out. Just for troubleshooting purposes, let me just write out what I is giving me and what odd is giving me. Let's even have even. Just rename this as index so that it becomes a little more obvious as to which one is which. 0 false true. So we are getting just the index. Maybe because I did these controls. Something went wrong. Okay, it's just writing, I mean, for the odd and even, it's just writing true or writing out true or false. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, index, we have index over here, and if it just the odd variable is just pointing out if the particular index is odd. Anyway, tags. So the other parts are working, but somehow the initial value is not working. Let's let me comment that out and write instantiate a new control than rather than utilizing the form builder dot control. So this will be form control. Still not working. It's actually not even binding. Cannot find. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this should be I, but not sure why that is not working. Give me 1 minute here. Let me refer to something, and I'll be right back. Okay. So basically, I mean, I need to bind it and not just provide it as a variable name. I need to bind it to this particular index. So that is what I was doing wrong. Find control with name 0. Okay, I thought that was it. Okay. it is iterating over it. That's why we are able to create more than one as soon as add tag button is clicked, but something is off that I'm unable to get my pulse on. Probably this is it. I need to give form array name on this particular div that we are using as parent. Form array name. Hopefully that works now. Okay, yeah, that was it. Okay, I'll take this off. So basically, these odd and even index, they can be used, let's say, to style alternate rows. Probably you have seen on many websites. So with Angular, this is the way to do it. There might be other ways, but this Angular exposes something, these variables anyhow, and then we could easily style the input elements or the that particular rows based on if it is even or not, or odd. So I'll take this line off, and then how to read those values. So with every add tag, I'll just write out this the value of this particular form array. Actually, I made this change. Let me take this off and uncomment the earlier one. Both should have worked, but I was just trying something else in the hope that this will fix it. Add new. Let me write a couple of things over here. One is this dot add product form dot value, and the other one is this dot add product form, maybe just this dot tags, because we already have the tags property. We'll read the value of it. And one more thing that we'll do is so a form array has a property called status. It's valid or invalid, pending or disabled depending on the validation status. So valid is if all the controls within the array has passed all validation checks. So that we can use to actually enable or disable the submit button. So right now we'll just go with add product form to actually totally submit it, because our new array is part of this form. It will participate in the overall validity of this form. So with each tag, what we see over here is we wrote three things to the console. One is this first one. We are displaying the entire form's value, which is name, brand, and everything included. So I'll just clear this off and then change it to some value, name, something like that, something different. And then everything is valid now, so the submit button is active. But I just want to add tag and look at these values. So name is p name that we just gave. This is the value of the form, and it displays the tags too as an array of strings. And this is just tags form array. It gives form arrays value. It gives us the strings as an array too if you want to read it separately instead of as part of the form. and it says valid because all these validations are passed. Now let me just delete the text from one of them and then click on the add tag one more time. Now this is invalid. Now we have 4 values because of the add tag. We got one more just now, but this form array is invalid because one of them is not passing the validation of requiredness. So let me just add one letter. It's still invalid because it did not pass the minimum length. Modify, and let me add some more text. It's invalid because it's more than 10 characters, and we have a validation that the max length of this text should be 10. So this is how we create a form array using reactive forms. And is there a way to do this using template driven forms? Yes, there is a way, and we can read it too, but it gets a little complicated. Not only complicated, but it's not the recommended way to do it. So let's have a glance at it too about how to do it. So we have the reactive forms way below over here, and up top we have the template driven form. Similarly, the UI would be similar. So instead of reading from a form array of the reactive forms, we would be doing it on our own. Because template driven form doesn't have support for things like that. So it would be something like this. So div, we don't need this form array name tags because we are not doing it the reactive way. We'll need this add tag button, but we'll have add tag template driven for TD. We have to maintain an array that would let us do ngFor over it and generate more forms. So this is, today's session I'm kind of dynamically going over things. I didn't get a chance in my professional career to actually use this form control array. Or implement the same using template driven form. So bear with me, most likely I'll keep falling down and I'll pick myself up and we'll travel on this journey with together. Yeah, cloning as well as this is sort of cloning too. We are generating a new method and new everything. So cloning might take a little while more, compared to what we are doing right now. So let's do it this way. Cloning you can do it as a practice exercise. I think that will help. It might not be a big difference with respect to the time, but let's save any time that we could so that we can go over more and more concepts, inshallah. So we'll still get the index and odd, the variable odd and even over any iterable, but we are not going after the tags control. So let's go after something else. Let's name it as tag array. This variable is scoped, so we can have the same variable, and we don't need this. But let's name, give it a name and an ID. ID should be unique, so name for tag. So let's go back and then add this method in our component class and then add this array. Add tag 1. What we'll do is basically just append something to this array, because we are not taking anything out of this array. All we need this array is to know how many forms, how many input tags to generate. So let it be an array of number initialized to empty array. So on add tag click, we need this dot tag array dot push. It doesn't matter what, we just push one. All we need is a count. At least, I mean, at this point of time, I don't see any need to actually go after unique values. So if need be, we'll come back and take care of it. Did you mean? Okay, add tag, it's not add tag 1, it's add tag td. So we have both the variables. And that is working, and we don't have initial value over here. Initial value, if it is a must to pass an initial value, probably we can just have a value over here. Or initial value, what we were doing earlier, if you want to replicate, we could turn this array into an array of strings. So this will be init. If you want to just replicate the functionality, what we did with the reactive forms. This will be new. So let's go over this one. I mean, this is the ability of Visual Studio or TypeScript to actually check for the typeness of our variable. So our variable over here is not explicitly defined as an array of strings, but we have initialized it as an array of string. So implicitly TypeScript infers that this will be an array of type string. So you can see that in the helper window, it's a property on add product component, and its name is tag array, and it is of type string array. So basically implicitly it's able to assume that this will be a type of array of strings, and when we try to push a number, it's throwing an error. So now we need to go back to the component and then bind the value that is coming as the entry in the array. As soon as we add one more, it will be new. So we are basically replicating the same behavior, but most likely the new tags will be empty or letting the user to enter something. And how do we read it? Let's just use the same add tag method and try to read it. So this gives, this functionality using template driven forms gives us an opportunity to learn something that we have seen earlier, but not as multiple items. So what am I talking about? Let's go over here in the add product component. We have a template reference variable that gives us the ability to refer it within the template. So as I highlight this, we can see that we are using, this is something else. Okay, most likely we are, I thought, okay, product form, this one. Okay, I think by mistake I copied this line from the template from the reactive form section, so I'll just take it out. So product form is this reference to this template reference variable. So as soon as we add a hash, that becomes a template reference variable. We don't have to even give it as ng model. Ng model, we assign it ng model so that we can read additional properties like if it is valid or not. So product name dot valid, but we could easily say do it. Let's say we could easily do it standalone. Let's say this way: label for product name. So just standalone without giving any equal to or proceeding further. So this is good enough. We can go back to the we can reference this same label anywhere within the template using this name. If we want to refer it in the component, we have to do something like this. We have to refer it by view child. So view child, the name whatever we have given over here, that's how we refer to the form. So I'll take this off for now. So for tag. Similarly, we have to do the same thing or similar thing, not the same thing. Instead of view child is for a single product, and we see one more decorator called view children. And if there are more than one, then we could use the view children and we go after that name or tag. We don't need a name for that. We can just give a hash for tag. Now this is the reference template reference variable, and we can read multiple children or multiple elements using this. So tags name is already taken. Tags template driven, we'll just name it as tags template driven, TD for that, TD for template driven, and let it make it return any of type any, and then we'll try to read it on each add tag. So basically, let me write also the form that we are returning as a view child. So this dot the form add product form, just product form. So the first line is product form, and it gives us the entire product, entire form, and then within the form we will have the form of it will have the value. And right now, because I haven't entered anything, product name is undefined, brand also is undefined, and fragile is true because we are defaulting it is to true, and it can have only two states anyway. So that's why we are getting that value. So let's clear that, enter some name, choose a brand, and then change this value to, and then see what we get in that form as the value. And actually we were after that query list, or so basically in this results array or as a list, we are getting the elements that we have defined the template reference variable on. So from that element, we can go after what we call is element ref is Angular concept, and it exposes a native element which will give us an HTML element that is referred using that element ref, and it will have a value that we can extract and then send over the wire, send it to backend for saving purposes. Instead of that, let me okay, anyway, you got the idea, right? So this is how we can read the value and update our database if we have to use the template driven forms and have the same functionality. But what is the advantage with respect to reactive forms is we can control, let's say, even the validation part of it and give the validation as required all the time. We did not take care of it using the template driven form, so let's add it over here. Input, this is required, max length 10 and minimum length is 3. So advantages of reactive forms are we can inject, we can easily test using by injecting this form builder and creating any number of forms that we would like. And I think we went over these the advantages in our last session. So this is easy to test, easy to mock compared to template driven forms. And because everything is written uh, in the component class, and whatever could be written in the component class is easy to test. So let me open OneNote and refer it for our next topic. I thought this would take a lot of time today, but it was. We still have half an hour left, so let's go over if other concepts if we can in the time that we have left now. So we looked at template driven forms and reactive forms, and we looked at how to validate these two. Yeah. Let's do the deployment of our application. So obviously, whatever we are developing right now is local. If you want to deploy it on a server, in an enterprise, there will be web servers, and the enterprises that I have worked with, they used to have IIS as their servers, and other enterprises or other companies might opt for Apache and different kind of web servers. So if you go to angular.io and look for deployment, there will be a guide as to how to deploy to various environments. So everything is pretty easy to understand over here. Yep, no, you are right. Reactive forms are controlled from TS, and that makes it easier to test. Whereas template-driven forms are controlled from HTML. Yep, I mean not totally, of course, but mostly. And template-driven forms, they directly write to the properties. They directly write to uh, yeah, properties we can bracket it to properties and using the ng model, and because they are directly writing to the properties, all we need is just to grab that property and then send it over the wire to the backend for it to get updated. Whereas in template driven forms, we'll have to manually get the values and then send that build that object and send it over if we are sending an object over. Yep, you are right. I mean, if somebody asks you in an interview, this could be one of the vital difference. So we have a little table over here how to deploy to different environments. So for IIS, this is what we have to do. We'll have to generate a dist folder. We'll do that in just a bit. Basically, I just wanted to show this page first and then go over and build our application. So to build our application, we need to do something called ng build. I'm just collapsing everything over here and see ngx server for Angular. Okay. So these are some of the environments. I believe most of them might be free. But let's go over one thing. GitHub pages. Basically, they let us deploy our applications for free, provided we are not using it for commercial purposes. And how to actually do it? Oops. Okay. So what does ng build do is it does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. It looks for any modules, any imported third-party packages that we have added to our project but haven't used at all. So it tries to get rid of that while making the final bundle. And that process is called tree shaking. And if there are any modules that we have written but we haven't routed them yet, it will drop all those modules too. And that concept is called tree shaking. And tree shaking reduces the final bundle size depending on if you have written any unused code. So if everything is used, it will not be able to do a lot, but it will try to minify. And minify is the concept where the empty spaces, extra lines and comments and those kind of things are taken out and made into a .min. For JS files, it will be .min.js, and for CSS files, new files will be generated called .min.css, which would be very compact in their code, and that would help reduce the bundle size being transferred from the server to the client and increase thereby increasing the performance. So what we have over here, after running that ng build successfully, it didn't throw any error, so our code was kind of solid. It generated a folder called this folder, and that is short for distribution folder. So basically it's distribution ready. Let me open the package.json. Over here we are telling it basically dist folder is default for Angular builds. So when we build, I thought this was in configuration too. Maybe it's over here. Yep. So we have a configuration for the build over here, and we are asking it to write at this output path, dist/app1. So whenever we do build, that's where it writes it. So it writes all the files that are needed for deployment. Now we can see over here quite a number of files. And if you want to deploy as is, we need to copy all of them to the production, to the server. Let me actually open that folder. I don't know why it is taking that long, but as soon as I run another command, it will just delete everything from over here. Okay, I'm not sure at what point of time did you send this message, did not get you. Can you just let me know what you did not get? I'll repeat it, inshallah. Tree shaking. So Angular looks at our application while building it, right? So it looks at if there is any code that we haven't used. So let's say we have another module over here. Somehow that is not working. So let me just browse to the path later on. But let's say we have another module, right? We just have one module right now. Let's say we have a module, and for this particular module, from the app module, we have a route saying that if somebody asks for product, and because we are lazy loading, so we are asking Angular to load children on demand the routes at this particular module, right? And that particular module has its own routes defined. So basically app module just defers the routing from /products onwards to the product management module. So let's assume that we have one more module over here, and we never added any route, either lazy loaded or eagerly loaded, to the app module for that particular module. So basically Angular senses that this particular module is not used at all because there is no link from the root module to that particular module. So it shakes it off. It doesn't generate any JavaScript. It doesn't transpile that particular TypeScript to JavaScript, and it doesn't include the entire module in the final build. That's called tree shaking. Or let's say we added third-party packages. In our application, we did not add any, but let's say there are quite a few packages that are available outside. Not quite a few, there are like tons of packages available from third parties helping us in easiness of what you say developing our applications. One of the popular modules is Moment, uh, that helps us in daytime calculation, daytime stuff. There are lots and lots of utilities over there, and I have seen many developers just importing it as by default, as one of the things that they do when they start an Angular app. So let's say we get a third-party package and finally decide not to use it anywhere, right? So Angular kinds of what you say has the ability, uh, not 100% foolproof, but it has the ability to look into unused packages too. And okay, let me not go further down on the things that I might not be 100% certain, but from what I know, Angular kind of what you say has the ability to look and not generate, not include those dependencies in the final output when we do the build. So that concept is called tree shaking basically. Okay, so let's go back to the dist folder. For some reason it's not opening. Let me open that. It's under C user trainer projects. So let's look at that, the size of the folder that got created. Let's run this using ng build the production flag. So with the production flag, what happens is it does many more optimizations. One of the optimizations that it does is called ahead of time compilation. Shaking, not shading. Yep. So ahead of time compilation refers to Angular compiling all our scripts ahead of time before sending it to the client. And the other type of compilation is just in time or JIT compilation, that basically sends the Angular compiler as well to the client, and the compilation happens just in time, not ahead of time. So with just in time, because Angular has to send the Angular's compiler, which is another JavaScript file, it adds to the size or the download size. So we have just seen it was 16 MB something, right? No, this is not complete, but still it's something 541 KB. So drastic reduction in size. So it does other things with when we have the prod build on. Among other things, the most important thing that I believe is the ahead of time compilation. So if you don't want that ahead of time compilation, we can pass in a flag, something like this, AOT. I believe this is right, false. I believe this is how we do it. But most of the time, I don't know. I mean, earlier at some point of time, I believe before Angular 8, even the prod build had AOT as false. We had to explicitly give the make it as true, so to build optimized distribution folder. So this is one of the concepts that would might be asked in an interview. What happens? What is the difference is our files our code files will get compiled ahead of time and sent over the wire, only the compiled file. But with just-in-time compilation, the Angular sends its own compiler to the client and the compilation happens on demand over there or just in time. So production build is complete. Let's go and have a look at the final size of that. It's 885 kilobytes. I would say, I mean, earlier it was 16 some bytes or even if it megabytes, now it's in kilobytes. So big difference. Now let's go and actually try to deploy to GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages, it has a little different requirement. I mean, the initial performance with respect to just in time would be hit, right? Because think the code will be compiled on demand just in time. So initially it might, the performance might get affected, but after that, the performance should be the same. So getting back to deploying our app to GitHub Pages. So first, there are steps over here, 5 steps. It's pretty easy. Let's deploy our app now. Let's copy it this way, otherwise it's inserting a new line and that new line is not letting us edit it. And this project name over here needs to be exactly as we have defined. It's case sensitive, app 1. Hopefully that works. Basically what it means is, if you look at our index file, we are assuming that our application would be at the root of the web server. And when we give a different base href, that means we are telling Angular to generate or to build our app assuming that it's not at the root. So we are changing that base href over here using this particular flag. And the second part over here after ng build with the production flag is the output path. Don't write to dist folder and instead write to the docs folder. So that's how GitHub is requires us to build before publishing on their pages. So default is dist, but we are asking it not to go after dist folder, but go after docs folder. So let me hit enter over here to generate a build for our app to make it ready to be published on GitHub Pages. That's done. Our docs folder is ready now. Let's just have a look at the size. I'll add these two changes as a separate set. One is for deployment, the other is for just our regular session changes. So let's do it separate. Looks like it added everything. I'll take this off. To GitHub pages. No, I did not follow one step before pushing it in. When this is done, we are supposed to make a copy of index.html and name it as 404.html. Do that now. Copy, paste, rename 404.html. Now let me push it back in. In a way, this was a demonstration how to separate out our change sets and uh, push it to GitHub as a separate set. So that part is done. So let me open my GitHub page, and then we already have an app one over there. That's what I was signed in. So we go to settings over here. Let me look at the code if everything is built. Anyway, I'll troubleshoot this, and then this is all it's supposed to be. Maybe there was a typo or somewhere. Repository name is app1. So it must be pretty simple. I'll try one more time. Okay, I'll figure it out, and then we'll go over what was wrong in our next session. Most likely it's still building it, and we are trying to hurry up, even though it gave us a message that it's already published. But anyway, all right, keep practicing, and then now you have not only code, a repository where to put up your code, but you can also actually show your finished product using GitHub pages for free. And it's not only GitHub pages, there is another site called Netlify where you can publish your work. So keep practicing and keep publishing. 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, where you will be comfortable. Let's say, I mean, if you're assuming that you are not comfortable today to show your work, but 10 years down the line, you will feel like, okay, I did something 10 years back. So even though it was not perfect, but this is the proof that I did something, because there will be timestamp and everything on the GitHub. So practice and also build your profile. Okay. All right, keep practicing, inshallah. I cannot emphasize enough how practice helps. Practice helps with your answers, practice helps with your concept, practice helps with getting confident. Inshallah, until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.